The first time Daniel Carter told me he wanted to build a house, I laughed. We were in our tiny apartment in Portland, Oregon. Half the ceiling was water-stained. The heater made a ticking sound like it was trying to count down its last breath. And the walls were thin enough to hear our upstairs neighbor's midnight yoga sessions. He sat across the room, legs crossed, laptop in his lap, and a hopeful look in his eyes. "Let's build our own place," he said. "Not just a house, a real home." I remember tossing a popcorn kernel at him and saying, "We can't even afford a new toaster. You want to build a house?" But that was Daniel, always dreaming 2 sizes bigger than reality. I'm Madeline Carter, 35, and at the time, I worked as an admin for a small insurance firm in downtown Portland. It wasn't a glamorous job, but it gave me structure, a sense of purpose. I liked the routine, the quiet. Daniel, on the other hand, was a software engineer, brilliant but sensitive, with a heart too soft for the tech industry's cutthroat culture. We met at a networking event I didn't want to attend. He dropped a plate of shrimp cocktail on my shoes. I should have been annoyed, but he had this awkward smile and said, "Well, this is one way to break the ice." We had drinks, laughed, talked about everything from mental health to sci-fi films. 6 months later, we moved in together. 2 years after that, we got married. Daniel was my calm in a noisy world, the kind of man who'd bring home lavender tea when I was stressed and who once spent a whole weekend assembling a bookshelf just to surprise me. But marriage wasn't all soft lights and Sunday mornings, especially not after Daniel started getting sick. Not physically at first. It began with insomnia, then paranoia at work. His boss, a man named Rick Walters, was the kind of person who smiled with his teeth, but not his eyes. He started cutting Daniel out of meetings, assigning impossible deadlines, and gaslighting him in performance reviews. Daniel tried to push through, but he unraveled. Slowly, quietly. One day, he just didn't get out of bed. He lay there, staring at the ceiling, whispering, "I'm not enough." He left his job shortly after that. For 3 months, we lived on my paycheck. Daniel started therapy, took medication, slept more, ate more, and then, like a flicker in the fog, the old Daniel returned. "I want to work again," he told me one morning. "Not because I have to, because I want to." He found a job at a local startup, not as fancy as his old one, but steady. Good people, less pressure. It didn't pay much, but it brought the light back to his eyes. That's when the house dream came back. And this time, I didn't laugh. Around that time, my mom, Sylvia, was in a terrible car accident. A delivery truck ran a red light. She survived, but her spine didn't. She became paralyzed from the waist down. She was 68, lived alone in a rickety old house in Corbett, about 45 minutes outside the city. I visited often, but the stairs, the narrow hallways, the cramped bathroom, it wasn't sustainable anymore. I remember crying in the hospital when they told us the news. Daniel held my hand and whispered, "Let's bring her home." We both knew what home meant, the house we hadn't built yet. Daniel's grandfather, Howard Carter, was a gruff old man with a secret soft spot for Daniel. When he heard about our plan, he smiled through his oxygen mask and said, "There's a piece of land near Lake Fern I've been holding on to. I want you two to have it." I was stunned. It wasn't just any land. It was lake-facing, sun-drenched, with tall pine trees surrounding it like quiet guardians. 10 minutes from the Carter family's estate, but tucked away enough to feel like our own world. We applied for a mortgage, and because Daniel hadn't been at his new job long, I had to put it in my name. It was a huge commitment. But when we stood on that land, wind in our faces, I knew it was the right choice. We designed the house ourselves. One floor, no steps, wide doorways, hardwood floors, a kitchen with lowered counters for my mom, a sunroom where she could read in the morning. We visited the site every week, picked out every tile, every cabinet, every light switch together. Daniel would often say, "This is more than just a house. It's a place where all of us can finally breathe." The day the house was finished, we cried. Mom rolled her wheelchair across the smooth floor and said, "It smells like home already." That night, we sat on the back deck drinking cheap wine and listening to the crickets. "I can't believe this is ours," I whispered. Daniel leaned his head on my shoulder. "It always was." Then came the visit. Tiffany, Daniel's older sister, showed up in a white SUV that looked more expensive than my entire salary. She stepped out wearing sunglasses, heels, and an attitude like she owned the place. Her husband, Gary, followed behind her, barely saying a word. They weren't invited. They didn't bring a gift. They didn't knock. They just walked in. "Wow," Tiffany said, looking around. "So this is what Grandpa's land got turned into. Cute." I smiled tightly. "Would you like a tour?" She looked at my mom's wheelchair and said, "Actually, I'd love to see where she sleeps. I mean, we all contributed to this house in a way, didn't we?" I didn't know what that meant, but I didn't like the way she said it. She stepped into my mom's suite, bright, spacious, with her own little kitchenette and access to the garden. "Oh, wow," Tiffany said. "This is nicer than our apartment." Dolores, Daniel's mother, trailed in behind her. Her tone was even worse. "Well, Sylvia sure got lucky, huh? One bad accident, and she goes from a shack to a lake house. Life's funny like that." My mother's eyes welled with tears. I opened my mouth to speak, but Daniel got there first. "There are things you don't say," he said, voice low and sharp. "Not if you want to be invited back." Tiffany scoffed. "We're family, Daniel. Don't be so dramatic." "No," he said. "We're blood. That's not the same thing." Dolores raised her eyebrows. "I always said you made a mistake marrying her. And now look at you, taking care of her crippled mother while she plays house." I took a shaky breath. My fingers were clenched at my sides. Daniel looked at me, then back at them. "Get out," he said. Tiffany laughed like he'd told a joke. He didn't laugh with her. They left that night. But they didn't really leave. Something had shifted. I felt it in the silence that followed, in the way Daniel stared at the fireplace without blinking, in the way Mom stopped rolling herself to the garden. They weren't done with us. I could feel it, and I had no idea how much worse it was about to get. Fall in Oregon was always my favorite time of year. The leaves turned to fire, the air was crisp, and for a while, the whole world felt quieter, more manageable. But that year, the season came with an undercurrent of unease. We had been in the new house for almost 4 months, but the peace I imagined never quite arrived. My mom, Sylvia, had settled into her new room with grace, but she rarely ventured outside anymore. Her love for morning reading on the porch had faded. I'd find her in bed most days, staring at the window, her book closed in her lap. "I don't want to be in the way," she said once, when I asked if she wanted to join me and Daniel for dinner on the back deck. "I know this isn't really my home." That stung. I sat on the edge of her bed and took her hand. "Of course it's your home. We built this for you, for us. Please don't let their words make you feel otherwise." She gave me a tired smile, but her eyes didn't brighten. Tiffany's visit had left a shadow, not just over Sylvia, but over Daniel too. He became quiet, withdrawn. His laugh, once effortless, now felt rehearsed. He stayed late at work, came home exhausted, and when I tried to talk about it, he'd kiss my forehead and say, "Just tired, Maddie. I'll be okay." I wasn't convinced. One Saturday morning, I was watering the plants by the kitchen window when I noticed a silver SUV parked at the end of our driveway. My heart sank. It was Tiffany again. She got out of the car wearing oversized sunglasses and holding a small poodle in a designer carrier. Gary trailed behind her, wearing a hoodie that read "Hustle Culture" and chewing gum like a teenager. I stepped outside before they could reach the front door. "Tiffany," I said flatly, "to what do we owe the pleasure?" She pushed her sunglasses to the top of her head and gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Relax, Maddie. We were just in the area and thought we'd stop by." "You live in Hillsboro. That's 2 hours away." She shrugged. We're thinking about moving closer to family, maybe even back into the neighborhood. It's been so long since we were all connected. I folded my arms. We're not interested in playing happy family. Don't be like that, she said, stepping closer. Besides, we're just here to see Mom. She said she misses the lake. That was when I noticed the bags in the back of the SUV. 3 large suitcases and a few cardboard boxes. Are you planning to stay? I asked. Just for the weekend, Tiffany said breezily. You don't mind, do you? I didn't answer. I turned and walked back into the house, trying to control my breathing. Daniel was in the living room, flipping through the newspaper. They're here, I said. He looked up slowly. Yeah, I know. You knew? He set the paper down. Tiff called me earlier this week. She said she and Mom needed some time away. I didn't think they'd actually show up. I told them not to. But they're here, I said, with luggage. He stood, ran a hand through his hair, and sighed. I'll talk to them. The weekend turned into a week. Dolores arrived on Sunday afternoon with a tray of frozen casseroles and a smug expression. Thought I'd save your poor wife some time in the kitchen, she said to Daniel as she placed them in our freezer. Sylvia stayed in her room most of the time. I could see how much it was affecting her. The house no longer felt like hers. Or ours. It felt invaded. Tiffany rearranged the living room furniture without asking. Dolores complained about the lighting in the hallway. Gary left his shoes in the middle of the floor and played loud YouTube videos late into the night. And Daniel? He said nothing. Every night, he'd sit on the porch, drink in hand, staring at the lake in silence. One evening, after dinner, I found Sylvia trying to pull herself into her wheelchair on her own. I rushed over. Mom, let me help! She looked at me with tears in her eyes. I don't belong here, Maddie. They make it very clear. I knelt beside her. You do belong. You're not the problem. She held my face. But you're suffering. I can see it. This house was meant to be a blessing, but it's becoming something else. That night, I confronted Daniel. Why are you letting them stay? I asked. Because I'm tired, he said, voice hollow. Tired of fighting. Tired of being the bad guy. They're my family. And what about me? I asked. And my mom? Are we not your family too? He looked at me, and for a moment, I saw the old Daniel flicker back. You are. God, Maddie, you are. But I've been holding everything together for so long. I feel like I'm cracking. I touched his hand. You don't have to hold it all alone, but we need boundaries, Daniel. They can't just barge into our lives and take over. He nodded slowly. I'll talk to them, I promise. But promises are fragile. 3 days later, I returned from work to find the living room filled with new furniture. Our old sofa, one that Daniel and I picked out together after saving for months, was gone. In its place was a sleek leather sectional and a huge flat-screen TV. Tiffany sat on the couch, sipping wine, flipping through channels. What did you do? I asked, voice shaking. She smiled. Don't worry, Maddie. We just upgraded. That couch was ancient. Where's our stuff? I demanded. Sold it, she said. Got a decent price, too. Craigslist can be a gold mine. I turned to Daniel, who was standing frozen in the hallway. Did you know about this? He looked gutted. I told them not to, he whispered. I couldn't believe it. This is theft. Tiffany stood. Don't be dramatic. It's not like you're poor. You can buy new stuff. That's not the point, I shouted. These things had meaning. They were ours. Sylvia wheeled in slowly, looking around the transformed space with sadness. It doesn't feel like home anymore, she said quietly. Dolores appeared in the doorway. Maybe it never was, she said. Maybe you people were just borrowing it. That night, I lay awake beside Daniel, staring at the ceiling, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. We had built a sanctuary, a home full of love, and now it felt like a battlefield. Daniel reached for my hand. I'm sorry, he whispered. I thought I could manage it. I thought they'd leave. They won't, I said. And if you won't make them, I will. The next morning, I called a lawyer. The storm didn't come with thunder or warning. It came with a phone call. It was a Wednesday. I remember because Sylvia had a virtual therapy appointment that morning, and I was late for work. My phone buzzed while I was sitting in traffic on I-84. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Mrs. Carter? The voice on the other end asked. It was shaky, but professional. Yes, I said, already feeling a chill crawl up my back. This is Mercy General Hospital. Your husband, Daniel Carter, was brought in by ambulance this morning. He collapsed at work. We need you to come in right away. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. What happened? I choked out. We believe it was a brain hemorrhage. He's currently in the ICU. My fingers went numb. The cars around me blurred into a haze. I remember pulling into the nearest shoulder, turning on my hazard lights, and just sitting there, heart pounding, hands shaking. A soft knock on my window startled me. It was a man in a FedEx uniform. Ma'am, are you okay? He asked, peering in. I managed to nod, barely. Yeah, just a bad call. I don't remember how I got to the hospital. I must have driven, but everything between that call and the ICU doors was a blur. When I walked in, a nurse led me to a sterile white room where Daniel lay unconscious, tubes in his mouth, machines beeping in an eerie rhythm. His skin looked too pale, too still. My knees buckled. The nurse caught me by the arm, gently lowering me into a chair. He was found unconscious at his desk by a coworker, she said softly. We believe it was a sudden rupture. He hasn't regained consciousness. I reached for his hand. It was warm but limp. I kissed his knuckles, whispering, I'm here. I'm here, baby. Please come back. They let me sit by him. Minutes turned into hours. My mom arrived in a taxi. She had heard the tremor in my voice and knew something was wrong. She wheeled herself into the room and broke down the second she saw him. Not Daniel, she sobbed. Not him. I held her, trying to stay strong, but it was useless. The doctor came in around 4 p.m. He looked at me with that careful, practiced sorrow that doctors use when they've delivered this news too many times. I'm sorry, Mrs. Carter, he said. There was too much damage. He's gone. I didn't scream. I didn't faint. I just stared at him like I didn't understand English. Then I looked at Daniel. My Daniel. And I crumbled. The funeral was a blur. People came. Co-workers, neighbors, even our old landlord from the apartment in Portland. They brought flowers, stories, casseroles. But not Tiffany, not Gary, not Dolores. I didn't expect them to show. I didn't even want them there. But they did send something. An email. We assumed Daniel had life insurance. We'd like to know the amount and when it will be distributed, Tiffany wrote. No condolences. No, we're sorry for your loss. Just money. I didn't respond. 3 days after the funeral, I returned home with Sylvia. The house was quiet, painfully so. Daniel's toothbrush still sat in the holder, his hoodie still draped over the arm of the couch. I hadn't touched anything. I wasn't ready, but something felt off. The porch light was on. I was sure I had turned everything off before we left. Maybe the wind tripped the sensor, I mumbled, trying to reassure Sylvia. But when I unlocked the door, I heard the television, loud. That wasn't right. I pushed open the door, and there they were. Tiffany, sprawled across my couch, barefoot, eating popcorn from a ceramic bowl that wasn't hers. Gary was digging through our fridge. Their dog was on Daniel's armchair. I froze. What the hell are you doing here? I said, voice barely above a whisper. Tiffany looked up, unfazed. Oh, hey, Maddie. Took you long enough to get back. Why are you in my house? I demanded. It's not your house, she said with a smirk. It was Daniel's, and he's gone, so now it's ours. I couldn't breathe. Where are our things? I scanned the room, the photos, the rug, the bookshelf. Gone. Sold, Gary said, popping open a soda. Most of it. Some junky resale store picked it up. We needed space for our stuff. You what? My vision blurred. I turned to Sylvia, whose face had turned a deep red. You had no right, I growled. Tiffany stood, arms crossed. Don't act like a victim. You don't even have kids. It's not like you need a house this big. You and your crippled mother should be grateful we're letting you stay until you figure something out. That's when I snapped. Get out, I said. Now. No, she replied, cool as ice. I spoke to a lawyer. Daniel didn't leave a will. That makes me and Mom next of kin. You're just the widow. You don't automatically get everything. The house is in my name, I hissed. I bought it, my mortgage, my salary. Doesn't matter, she said. We're not going anywhere. I stormed out and called Linda, Daniel's friend, our family lawyer. I told her everything. She was horrified. Do not engage them, she instructed. We'll file an emergency injunction first thing tomorrow. Meanwhile, I need all your property documents, insurance policies, mortgage statements, everything. That night, I didn't sleep. Sylvia cried quietly in her room. I sat on the floor of Daniel's closet, holding one of his shirts, breathing in the scent of cedarwood and cologne, praying for this nightmare to end. The next day, Linda began the legal process, but Tiffany and Gary were smug. Go ahead, she sneered when I served the notice. We'll see you in court. But remember, you're alone now. No Daniel to protect you. And that was the moment I realized something. I was alone, but I wasn't helpless. Daniel might be gone, but he hadn't left me with nothing. He left me the will to fight. The first few nights after Tiffany and Gary took over the house, I couldn't sleep in my own bed. I found myself curled on the small couch in my mom's room, listening to the muffled sounds of the television blaring in the living room, Gary's laugh echoing through the halls like a taunt. My mother tried to keep her composure, but I saw the way she winced every time she heard Dolores's voice barking orders, or Tiffany slamming a cabinet door like she owned the place. You shouldn't have to live like this, Maddie, Mom whispered to me one night as we both stared at the ceiling, sleepless. Neither should you, I replied, reaching over to squeeze her hand. We were guests in our own home, prisoners in a place we built from love. Linda was moving as fast as the law would allow, but in the meantime, I was stuck living under the same roof as my late husband's worst influences. Tiffany had gone full tyrant mode. She had claimed the master bedroom and redecorated it with gaudy gold-accented furniture. Dolores had moved into Daniel's old office, calling it her reading lounge, though she mostly used it to nap with her dog, Biscuit, who now had more freedom in the house than my mother. Gary, meanwhile, turned the garage into his personal man cave, stringing up LED lights and blaring music through subwoofers that made the windows rattle. The Carter invasion was total. Every time I tried to assert myself, I was met with a wall of smirks, sarcasm, and twisted legal threats. You can't kick out family, Tiffany would say while sipping coffee from my favorite mug. Especially not when that family was here before you were even a Carter. I am a Carter, I'd remind her. Daniel made sure of that. Daniel's gone, she said with a smile that made my stomach turn. Get over it. The day I discovered they had removed all the photos of Daniel and me from the living room was the day something inside me shifted. They hadn't just taken my furniture or my space. They were erasing the life I built with him. I found the photos shoved in a cardboard box in the garage, next to an old vacuum and some broken picture frames. I stood there for nearly half an hour, clutching one of our wedding photos, trying to hold back the tears. He looked so alive in that picture, so hopeful. I sat down on the cold concrete floor and whispered, I'm sorry, Daniel. I'm trying. I swear I'm trying. Sylvia started becoming more reclusive. She only left her room to use the bathroom or when I wheeled her out into the sun on the back deck early in the morning before anyone else was awake. One day, as I was tucking a blanket over her knees, she looked at me with tired eyes and asked, Do you think he would have wanted us to stay? I didn't answer right away. He wanted us to be safe, I finally said. He wanted peace, not this. Then maybe peace isn't here anymore, she said softly. That conversation haunted me. I started thinking about what Daniel used to say. Don't waste energy on people who will never understand you. He had said it a dozen times about his mother and sister. I used to brush it off, thinking he was just venting. Now, those words felt like prophecy. Linda called me one morning with an update. "We've got enough to file an emergency eviction claim," she said, "but it won't go through for a few more weeks. The court's backed up. And if they contest it, we might be looking at months." "I don't have months," I said. "I'm barely surviving as it is." She paused. "Then maybe it's time we consider an alternative." "Like what?" I asked. "Leaving," she said. "Starting fresh. You're not surrendering, Maddie. You're choosing peace. Sometimes that's the braver thing." I hung up, heart pounding. Leave? Leave the house Daniel and I built? Leave the place where every corner held a memory, a whispered conversation, a shared smile? The thought made my chest ache. But I also thought about waking up to Tiffany's blaring pop music, to Dolores yelling on the phone about her favorite slot machine, to Gary's loud chewing at dinner. I thought about my mom flinching at every sarcastic comment tossed her way. That night, I stayed up late researching apartments with accessible features. Just browsing, I told myself. Nothing serious. Then I found it. A 2-bedroom condo on the 5th floor of a secured building across town. It had a spacious balcony, an elevator, wide doorways, and most importantly, silence. No family drama. No ghosts of arguments echoing through the halls. Just space to breathe. I visited it the next day while Tiffany and Gary were out. The property manager, a kind man named Alan, walked me through it. "We have a lot of older tenants," he said. "It's a very calm building. We don't allow loud parties or disruptive guests. You'll be safe here." I walked through the empty rooms, imagining my mom's books stacked by the window, a cozy rug under our feet, a new beginning. I signed the lease on the spot. 3 days later, I had the resale company that took my furniture recover whatever they could. I filed a police report, citing unauthorized removal of personal property. The company cooperated. Some of my belongings had already been resold, but several pieces were recovered. I paid to have them held in storage. The hardest part was telling my mom. When I wheeled her out onto the deck that evening, the sun was just starting to dip below the lake. "Mom," I said, "we're leaving. I signed a lease." She didn't look surprised, just relieved. "Thank God," she whispered. "I was scared you'd keep fighting until it broke you." I packed up quietly over the next few days. Tiffany hardly noticed. Gary was too busy with his man cave. Dolores spent most of her time napping or gossiping with her friends on speakerphone. On the last morning, I gathered my mom and walked out without a word. As we reached the driveway, Tiffany stepped outside, coffee in hand. "Running away, huh?" she called. "Guess you finally realized you don't belong here." I turned to her. "I never belonged in your world, Tiffany. That doesn't mean I don't know who I am." "Whatever," she scoffed. "We're keeping the house. You're not getting a penny." I smiled. "Good luck with that." Then I opened the car door and helped my mother inside. We drove away without looking back. I wasn't running. I was reclaiming my life. Moving into the new condo wasn't what I would call easy, but it was necessary. There was no dramatic music, no sudden sense of relief as we crossed the threshold. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that settles deep into your chest when you've been holding your breath for too long. Alan, the property manager, greeted us at the door with a soft smile and handed me the keys. "Welcome home," he said. Those 2 words hit harder than I expected. My mother, Sylvia, was seated beside me in the passenger seat, her fingers clutching her favorite scarf. One Daniel had given her for Christmas 2 years ago. She hadn't said much during the drive, but as I helped her out of the car and wheeled her into our new place, she took a deep breath and said, "It smells like possibility." I smiled. "Or new paint and Lysol." She chuckled softly. It was the first time I'd heard her laugh in weeks. The condo was modest. 2 bedrooms, an open-plan kitchen and living room, and a balcony that overlooked a line of tall pine trees instead of a lake. Still, it was beautiful in its own way. Sunlight poured in through the large windows, and the silence wasn't oppressive like it had been in the old house. This silence was peaceful, sacred. We unpacked slowly. I had retrieved a portion of our furniture, my reading chair, a few picture frames, a handmade quilt Daniel's grandmother once gave us. The rest, the items Tiffany sold, were just gone. Irreplaceable. I told myself not to focus on that. Things could be replaced. Memories, not so much. Linda visited on our third day in the new condo, bringing paperwork and a bottle of wine. "You did it," she said, plopping onto the couch with a sigh. "You actually walked away." "It doesn't feel like a victory," I admitted. "It's not," she said gently. "It's a transition. There's strength in that." "Did they sign the agreement?" I asked. "Yes," she nodded. "I had them cornered. Dolores and Tiffany both signed a non-contact agreement in exchange for you vacating the property voluntarily. They can't legally reach out to you again unless it's through me. You're free." "Not really," I muttered. "They still live there, in our house." Linda poured the wine. "Not for long." I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" She handed me a folder. Inside were copies of the mortgage paperwork, insurance policies, and legal agreements Daniel and I had signed when we bought the house. "Because the house is in your name, and because the mortgage is solely under your financial responsibility, the moment payments stop for more than 120 days, the property is subject to foreclosure." I blinked. "Wait, that means that they have no legal standing to remain in the house unless someone pays the mortgage," she said. "And since you're not paying anymore, the clock is ticking." I stared at her. "You planned this?" She smiled, sipping her wine. "Let's just say, I believe in poetic justice." "How long do they have?" "Less than a month, probably. Once the bank notices the missed payments, it's only a matter of time." Over the next few weeks, I focused on rebuilding. Sylvia began physical therapy again. The condo had a small community room with volunteer-led wellness classes, and she joined a weekly book club with a group of retired teachers. I watched her come back to life, bit by bit, her shoulders lifting, her eyes finding warmth again. As for me, I took time off work and started seeing a therapist named Nora. She had kind eyes and a no-nonsense tone I appreciated. "You're grieving more than your husband," she said during our first session. "You're grieving a dream, a future, an identity." "It feels like I'm empty," I said. "Like I've been scraped clean from the inside." She nodded. "That means you're ready to fill yourself back up." I spent mornings journaling, afternoons organizing, evenings cooking simple meals with Sylvia. One night, we made Daniel's favorite pasta dish, rigatoni, with spicy sausage and roasted tomatoes. As we sat down to eat, I lit a candle and placed it beside a framed photo of him on the table. "To Daniel," I whispered. Sylvia raised her glass of ginger ale. "To peace." We clinked glasses. Then came the call. It was a blocked number. I let it ring 3 times before answering. "Hello?" I said. A pause. Then, "This is Tiffany." My stomach tightened. "You're not supposed to call me," I said coldly. "This violates our agreement." Yeah. Save the legal crap. I didn't know who else to call." "Why would you think I'd want to help you?" "Because the house is being seized," she snapped. "We got a notice taped to the door today. Bank's foreclosing. What the hell is going on?" I said nothing. Just let the silence do the work. "Did you stop paying?" she asked, her voice rising. "You're the one who walked away. This is your mess." "No," I said. "This was always your mess. I just stopped cleaning up after you." "We're being evicted," she shouted. "We have nowhere to go." "You have each other," I said. "And you have that precious entitlement you clung to so tightly. Maybe you can sleep on that." "You're a monster," she hissed. "You abandoned your own family." "Daniel was my family," I said quietly. "You were just the lesson." I hung up. The next week, I received a formal letter from the bank. The house had officially entered foreclosure proceedings. Tiffany and Dolores were given 30 days to vacate. Gary had already left. He'd taken what he could and disappeared, likely running from creditors or just the chaos. Dolores sent one last email through Linda's office, begging for help. "Please, Maddie," she wrote. "I know we were hard on you, but we're family. You have the means. Just a small loan until we get back on our feet." I didn't reply. Instead, I walked to the balcony of our condo with a cup of tea, the scent of jasmine drifting in the breeze. Sylvia sat beside me in her chair, knitting a new scarf. "Did you ever think it would come to this?" she asked. "Honestly," I said, "I thought I'd have to fight forever. But sometimes, letting go is the real fight." She nodded. "Daniel would have been proud." I turned to look at the sky, the soft hues of dusk painting the horizon. "I think he already is." It was exactly 33 days after I received the foreclosure confirmation that Linda called me with an edge of triumph in her voice. "It's done," she said. "They're out. Sheriff served the notice this morning. The house is officially under bank possession. No Carter is allowed within 500 feet without being considered trespassing." I stared at the wall in front of me, silent, not quite sure how to feel. "And Tiffany?" I asked. "Where did she go?" "From what I gather," Linda replied, "she and Dolores have been couch surfing. Apparently, they tried to move in with a friend of Dolores's, but that lasted less than a week. Too much drama. Now they're in a low-income housing complex on the east side." "Public housing?" I asked, more shocked than anything. "Yep," Linda confirmed. "Not exactly their dream lake house." I didn't laugh. I wasn't even tempted to. There was a kind of emptiness in the victory. Not because I regretted it, but because I had already moved so far beyond them. Their downfall didn't even feel relevant anymore. I thanked her, hung up the phone, and walked to the window where the light spilled into our quiet little condo. Outside, children played in the garden courtyard below. Sylvia was on the balcony, watering her plants, a ritual she had taken to every morning with quiet joy. When I stepped outside to join her, she looked up at me and said, "You look lighter." "Maybe I am," I said. Later that week, I received a letter, handwritten, shaky cursive, smudged in places. It was from Dolores. The envelope was cheap, the kind you'd get in bulk at a dollar store. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Madeline, I know I don't deserve your kindness. I know I was cruel to you and to your mother, and I probably don't even realize the full extent of the pain I caused. I've lost everything, the house, the money, even Gary, who finally had enough of us and walked out. Tiffany barely speaks to me now unless she needs something. And here I am, old and alone. I think about Daniel every day. I miss him terribly. I wonder if he'd be ashamed of me. Maybe he should be. But I'm writing to you not to ask for anything, just to say, I'm sorry. Dolores." I read the letter twice. Then I folded it, walked to the trash bin, and dropped it inside. Forgiveness was one thing. Reopening doors that nearly destroyed you was another. Word got around quickly about their new situation. A mutual friend from Daniel's former job, a guy named Josh, who still kept in touch, called me and said, "So, is it true they're in Glenfield Towers now?" Glenfield Towers had a reputation. Not the worst place in the world, but far from the pristine image Dolores had always tried to maintain. "It's true," I replied. "Wow," he said. "She once told me your mom was a charity case. Funny how the tables turn." "It's not funny," I said. "It's sad. But it's also not my responsibility anymore." The truth was, even in their collapse, I felt no desire to gloat. I didn't need vengeance. I needed peace. And I finally had it. Sylvia thrived in our new home. She joined a knitting circle at the local library, became friends with a kind woman named Bernice, who baked the most incredible banana bread, and even reconnected with an old neighbor who had moved to the same building. One evening, I came home to find the two of them sipping wine and playing Scrabble at our dining table. "I'm winning," Sylvia declared with a proud smile. "Don't let the wheelchair fool you. I'm still sharp as a tack. I laughed, and for a brief moment, it felt like life had rewritten itself in the most unexpected way. I returned to work part-time, and Nora, my therapist, encouraged me to start journaling again. You've been through war, Maddie, she said. It's okay to want to forget, but don't erase your own growth. So I wrote. I wrote about the house, the dreams, the betrayal, the grief, the painful nights, the hard choices. And I wrote about Daniel, how his laugh sounded like gravel on a rainy morning, how he once danced with a mop in the kitchen because we were out of real music, how he told me that life isn't about winning against people, but surviving yourself. His words echoed in my head every time I felt the pull of bitterness. Live well, Madeline, he once said. That's the real legacy. One night, I stood on our balcony watching the stars and whispered, I hope I'm doing it right. And maybe I was. Then came the final blow for Tiffany and Dolores. A neighbor from their building, a blunt woman named Carla, contacted me through Facebook. I don't mean to stir the pot, she wrote, but you might want to know, your ex-in-laws are not exactly model residents. She sent a video, recorded on her phone, of Tiffany screaming at another tenant in the hallway over laundry room usage. Another showed Dolores hosting a loud party on a Tuesday night, complete with cheap boxed wine and karaoke. They're this close to getting evicted, Carla added. Management's had it. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. That part of my life was closing, quietly, without my help. What goes around, comes around. A month later, I received another letter. This one from the bank, confirming the final auction of the lake house. It had sold for more than expected. The proceeds, after paying off the mortgage, were minimal. But to me, it wasn't about the money. It was the closure. The chapter finally finished. I poured myself a cup of tea, sat on the floor with Sylvia, and we watched the rain tap against the windows. Do you miss it? She asked. The house? I miss the idea of it, I said, but not what it became. Then we're better off, she said, resting her head on my shoulder. And we were. Some stories don't end with fireworks. They don't wrap up in neat little bows or dramatic showdowns. Sometimes they just dissolve like morning fog, leaving behind clarity you didn't know you needed. That's how it felt as life slowly settled into something quiet, something steady. The chaos that had once consumed my world was no longer knocking at my door. I wasn't waiting for the next betrayal, the next blow, or the next loss. I was simply living, and for the first time in what felt like years, that was enough. Our condo had become more than just a place to live. It was our sanctuary. The space felt warmer now, lived in, touched by laughter and healing. My mom, Sylvia, had begun redecorating, insisting on hanging up art pieces we'd bought years ago, but never had space for. She found joy in rearranging the bookshelf weekly, declaring each new layout temporary but inspired. She even painted a small landscape of pine trees and sunrise that now hung above the fireplace. I'd catch her humming sometimes while watering her plants, the sound so familiar and comforting it made my chest ache. It reminded me of childhood mornings before school, before the world got complicated. I found myself working again, part-time still, easing back into routines. I'd stop by a little coffee shop near the office each morning, where the barista, a young woman named Ellie, learned my order within 3 visits. Large chai, extra cinnamon, no foam, right? She'd smile. You got it, I'd say, and for a few seconds, I'd feel seen. These were small things, but they mattered. They became part of the fabric of my new life. Nora, my therapist, called it grounding through dailiness. Healing isn't a lightning bolt, she said during one of our sessions. It's a sunrise, slow, steady, and easy to miss if you don't pay attention. One evening, as Sylvia and I sat on the balcony watching the city lights flicker like stars below, she turned to me and said, I've been thinking about Daniel a lot lately. Yeah, I said softly. Me too. He'd be proud of you, Maddie. I didn't answer right away. I just let her words wash over me. Do you think he forgave them? She asked after a pause. I shook my head. I don't think Daniel ever wasted energy on resentment, but I do think he chose peace, just like we did. She nodded slowly, her eyes glassy. It still hurts sometimes. I know, I said, placing my hand over hers. It probably always will, but we're still here and we're okay. Some days, memories still hit like waves. I'd walk past a certain cologne at the store and freeze, or hear a song we used to dance to and find myself blinking back tears. Grief doesn't go away, it just learns how to live alongside you. And when I found myself missing Daniel the most, I'd write. I filled 2 whole journals with letters to him. Some were updates, mundane things like, I finally figured out how to fix the garbage disposal, or, Mom burned the toast again and tried to blame the toaster. Others were confessions. I was so angry at you for dying. I hated that you left me alone to face them. And some were just wishes whispered into paper. I hope there are lakes in heaven. I hope you're building something beautiful. I hadn't seen or heard from Tiffany or Dolores since the foreclosure. Word through Linda, who still occasionally got mail forwarded from their old address, was that they had moved to a small town in southern Oregon, staying with a distant cousin. I had no intention of contacting them, not out of cruelty, but out of wisdom. Some bridges, once burned, should never be rebuilt. That lesson came the hard way. I had learned that you cannot save people who do not want to be saved, and you cannot build homes on foundations of resentment and greed. One afternoon, I got an unexpected letter. It was from the same lawyer who had handled the property seizure. Inside was a simple statement confirming that the final bank proceedings had concluded and that there was a small overage refund being returned to me. It wasn't much, maybe a couple $1,000s, but it felt symbolic, like the universe saying, here's your piece, the last piece. I used that money to book a small getaway for Sylvia and me, a weekend retreat at the Oregon coast. We stayed in a cozy cabin overlooking the cliffs, the ocean crashing against the rocks with a power that was both humbling and healing. On the second night, we lit a small candle for Daniel. Sylvia wrote his name in the sand, and we watched as the tide gently carried it away. Not erased, not forgotten, just returned to the world. On the final morning, I woke early and walked down to the beach alone. The sky was painted in shades of peach and silver, the kind of colors Daniel would have called ridiculously romantic. I sat on a driftwood log and let the breeze fill my lungs. And for a moment, I didn't think about the house, or the fights, or the courtroom, or the betrayal. I thought about Daniel's hands, warm and steady, his laugh, his dreams, and mine. I kept going, I whispered. Even when it felt impossible, I kept going. That night, back at the condo, I pulled out a clean page in my journal and wrote, I survived the collapse of a dream. I rebuilt from ashes. I walked away from noise, and I chose silence. Not emptiness, but space. Space for peace. Space for me. And maybe that's what home really is. Not 4 walls or a lake view, but the people you protect, the truths you refuse to let go of, and the peace you fight to earn. As I closed the journal, a breeze drifted in through the window. It carried the soft scent of pine and rain. I turned off the lights, crawled into bed, and listened to the night. I didn't need to look over my shoulder anymore. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another chapter of life, love, and resilience. We share real, emotional stories that speak to the soul. Stories that remind us we're not alone. Whether you're healing, hoping, or just holding on, there's always a place for you here. New stories are posted regularly, and each one is crafted to inspire, comfort, and connect. So stay with us, because the next story might be the one that changes everything for you.